This is part 5 of our Subprograms series, and in today's lesson we're going to be talking about custom procedures and particularly about what reference parameters are. Now, in our previous videos we've been talking about how to create our own procedures and how to create our own functions. So before we get into reference parameters, let's just summarize what we know. First of all, we know that a function always returns one value. Functions return only one result. So whenever we need a calculation being done or one answer to be sent back, we can use a function. We know that procedures do not return any values. They just do a particular job. You'll see that from our previous video. They just do something for us and they get a job done. Nothing's being returned. However, if we wanted to, we could modify the values of variables inside a procedure. So, for example, if we send a particular value to a procedure, we can have that value changed inside the procedure in such a way that in the main program it reflects the same change. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let's use an example of a procedure that we currently use in Delphi. Let's look at the increase procedure. Now, for those of you who know what the increase does, that takes an integer and it adds 1 onto it. So before I call this procedure, let's say, for example, rnum is our parameter. We've got a variable called rnum, and let's say rnum has 8 in it at the current moment in time. The value in rnum is 8. Now I call the increase rnum procedure. So we are sending that 8 as a parameter to the increase procedure. Something's going to happen inside the code of the increase procedure and it's going to just do its job. But if I display the value of rnum after I've called the procedure, it will now be a 9. It would have changed because when I sent the value of rnum to the increase procedure, inside the procedure, it went and changed the value of rnum in such a way that it's now reflected in our main program. So in sort of a way, it's actually done. It's not really returned anything, but it's actually modified my rnum variable. It had access to actually change it. Let's look at another example. Do you remember the delete procedure from string handling? We give it a string and a starting position, starting character, and how many characters we want to delete, and it will change s name. So let's say S name has the word information in it. So S name has the word information. Now we call our delete procedure and we say delete from S name starting at position 3 for 2 characters. If I display S name after this delete procedure has been called, the value in S name will now be information, but without the F and the O, because the third and fourth character have been deleted because we deleted from position 3 for 2 characters. So we have physically changed S name from within the procedure. So we've modified the variable. Okay, so that's almost like a way of making a procedure return something. So let's look at what value parameters are. So we are going to create a procedure called getDetails. Now, if you remember the example we did with functions, I hope you remember the South African ID number has the first couple of digits represent the day, the month, and the year of a person who has that ID. So the first 2 characters would be the year, the next 2 would be the month, and the next 2 would be the day of that birth date. And we created a function in a previous example of getting the month and sending back what that month was, if it was January. But let's say we have a procedure here, and what we're going to do is we are going to we're going to call it like this. We're going to call it with 3 parameters, okay? Or not 3 parameters, 4 parameters. We're going to send through the ID number, and then a variable to store the day, and a variable to store the month, and a variable to store the year. So we can extract the ID and then put the values into the 3 variables at the end. Okay, so when we send through that SID, the value that is in SID will be then sent to whatever is in the getDetails procedure for SID. Whatever is in our day, although there will be nothing in there, will go to our day in the getDetails. Whatever is in RM will go to the R month variable, and whatever is in I Y will go to the I year. So we actually aren't going to put values into RD, RM, or RY. We're just going to actually give a value in SRD num. So let's try this example. Let's first see how it works, if this is going to work first of all. So the first thing I'm going to do, like we do with all our custom procedures, is we're going to declare our procedure, which we said was get details. And we said we were going to send through an RD number of type string, semicolon, because remember these are different variable types. And then I was going to send through 3 integers, 1 to represent the day, 1 to represent the month, and 1 to represent the year. And they are going to be of type integer. Basically, what I want to do is I want to send through an ID number, and then afterwards, whatever is in our day will be the value of the day. For example, if it was 01, 11, 21, then that 21 represents day 21. I want our day to have a 21 in it. I want our month to have an 11 in it because it was the 11th month. I want our year to have 01 in it. Okay? Or we could make it 2001. We just add 2000. That's fine. We'll pretend all the people in our ID are going to be born after the year 2000. So we have created our procedure, or not, we've created the declaration. I press Control-Shift-C. Okay, so now we're at the code. Now I'm going to believe that there is an ID number in SRD. I'm going to give you an example of a South African ID number. Could be, for example, 02, 03, 04. So that would represent the year, that would represent the month, and that would represent the day that they were born. Let's make it a 29 so that it's more clear. And then there will be a whole bunch of numbers after it. We don't have to worry about those numbers. So let's pretend that SRD has something that looks like that. We need to believe that. I'm also going to pretend that there is nothing in our day, our month, or our year. Even if there is something, I don't care. I want to put the answers into those variables. So although I'm getting this as input, I'm not actually going to use our day, our month, or our year for values. I'm not going to need what's in them. I'm going to put my answers into those variables. I want to change them. So, for example, I'm going to say our year is equal. We're going to copy from our ID number, from SRD, we're going to copy from position 1 for 2 characters. So we're going to copy from position 1 for 2 characters, but that's going to be some sort of string, and we've got I here as an integer, so I'm going to say convert it from a string to an int. So now it's going to be a 2, and I don't want to send back the year 2. I'm just going to take that integer that we've converted and add 2000 onto it. So it will extract that string 02, it'll convert it to an integer, so it'll be the number 2. We add 2000 to it, it'll be 2002 in this, if this was the ID number, if that was the ID number. It could be a different ID number, we don't know. We're just going to assume for this case that everyone that uses this program is going to be born after the year 2000. We're not going to worry about those in the 1900s, just to simplify our code for this example. And to work out the month, it's very similar. We are going to copy from SRD, from that variable, starting at position, well, there's the month, starting at position 3, copying for 2 characters. So we're then going to extract that 03, but we want to send it back as an integer, so we're going to convert it from a string, because copy returns a string, string to int, and send back the integer version of that string. And then we're going to send our day is going to be copying from SRD, starting at, well, we want to get those 2 characters for the day, starting at position 5 for 2 characters, but that's going to return a 29 as a string. We want to send it back as an integer, so convert it from a string to an int, and that is the code for my procedure. So we're going to get in an ID number, and I'm going to physically change those variables so that they have changed. Okay, so I've made my procedure. Now we're going to use my procedure. I've got this lovely little button and memo. I'm going to say this is my ID number. This is my ID number there. You can see they were born in 01, the 11th month on the 21st. So what we're going to do is I'm going to call my procedure called get details. And in sDetails, I need an ID. Well, there's an ID. I'm going to send through sRD_num. So whatever is in sRD_num, this thing is going to be sent to here. Okay. So sRD_num. Then I need a variable that represents the day. So I'm going to put RD, and then I'm going to put RM for the month and R here for the year. So I'm going to send back these variables so that when they change our year, our month, our day, that the values get sent back. That's what I want to happen. Okay. So to test it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to display the details of RD, RM, and RY in the memo control both before and after the procedure, just to see how they change and if they change. So I'm going to do that I'm going to go ahead and do that quickly. So I've gone ahead and written this code quickly. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you what is inside the ID, the RM, and RY variable before we call the procedure. So let's just see what it looks like. So this is what we've set our ID number to. Okay, and we haven't given ID, RM, or RY any values. You'll see there's no values given to. So there should be random things in there when we run display ID, RM, and RY. So when I run the program and I display, you'll see RD, RM, and RY, all these random different numbers because they haven't been given any values. They've just been declared. Now what I want to happen is I want to send an ID number through to my procedure. I'm sending these variables and I am physically changing those variables. That's what I want to happen. So when I declare those variables, when I send through these parameters, there's now a link between sRD_num and sRD. So whatever's in there is now in there. Whatever is in ID is now in R day. Whatever's in RM is in R month. Whatever is in RY is in R here. So I'm hoping that if I change these variables in the code here, that they will reflect in these variables. That's what I want to happen. Let's see if that actually happens. So I'm going to now remove this code, which will now display RD, RM, and RY after the procedure has been called. So let's see if we have some results. So if we move up here, we can see that before the procedure, those were the values inside our three variables. After the procedure was called, those are the values inside our variables. So they have not changed. So even though we have referred to those variables inside the code and given them new values, those new values have not reflected back to the original variables. And that is what we call value parameters. When we give a parameter, like here, sRD_num, that is just a value. It's not going to change. If we change sRD_num inside the procedure, sRD_num over here will still keep its original value. It's not going to be altered by the procedure. It's just sending through a value. It's not being referenced. So as you can see, these are value parameters. The value is just being sent to the procedure. The value is just being sent to the procedure. The value has been sent to the procedure. The value has been sent to the procedure. Nothing is coming back to the original program. If we change our day inside our procedure, that's not going to be reflected over here because it's a one-way traffic. But we want to change our day so that RD changes. We want to change our month so that RM. And if that happens, then we're going to make use of reference parameters. And the way that you make a reference parameter, we first need to identify what is a value parameter and what's a reference parameter. In this case, we are sending the ID number to the procedure, but we're not changing the ID number. So I'm not bothered about SID num changing. So that is just a value parameter. I want that value to be sent to SID, but I'm not expecting anything to come back. The other three variables are D, RM, and I here. These three over here, we do want them to be sent to the procedure, and if they change in the procedure, we want the new values to be sent back. So we want these three variables to become reference parameters. So if you want variables to become a reference parameter, then you have to put a VAR in front of them in the declaration. Now, because I've got three of the same type, I can just put one VAR there, and all three of those variables will become reference parameters. If I wanted the ID to also be a reference parameter, I would have to put a VAR in front of this variable and a VAR in front of these three. Okay, but we just have to put that there. If we do that, so it looks something like that. There's the word VAR in front of our declaration of the three variables. What happens then is when we send the value for SID num, it gets sent to SID. But when we send RD to RD, it gets a reference parameter. In other words, the value that goes to RD, if it changes inside the procedure, the new value for RD will now be reflected in RD. And the same will occur for R month and R year. So that's what we want. We want there to be almost like a link between the variable declared in the procedure and the variable declared when we call the procedure, in such a way that if we change those variables inside the procedure, that they are reflected in the original program. Let's see if that works. So I'm at my original procedure declaration. Remember, we must change the declaration. We want SID to remain a value parameter. We want it to stay a value that gets sent in, but we're not cared about changing it. We want to change these variables. So I'm going to put a VAR in front of the R day, R month, R year. Because they're all declared as integer together, like that in one instance, all three of them are now becoming reference parameters. I now must go down to my procedure code, and remember that your declaration and your top of your procedure code must be exactly the same. So we're going to put the VAR over there as well, so that reflects. That's the only change we have to do. So by putting that VAR, I've now said if our day changes here, send back the answer back to when it was called. So over there, RD is called. It's got nothing in it before the procedure, but we change our day. There's a link between RD and our day. There's a link, a reference link. So if we change our day in our procedure, the new value will then be reflected back to our day. Let's see if it works. So remember, when I run the program, it's first going to display the values before the procedure is called, and then display the values after the procedure is called. And there we go. You can see there RD and RM and IR have no value in them. They're all zeros before the procedure is called. But after the procedure is called, you can see they've got new values. And are they the correct values? Well, let's come up to our code. We send through that to 01 2001 for the year. Then it's an 11, then it's a 21. So it extracted those variables correctly and actually changed RD, RM, RY. And so that is how we make reference parameters, how we change, if we change a value of a parameter inside the procedure, how we can get it to reflect back. Just a little note about that. If I ever called a procedure and those were reference parameters, which they are now, you cannot send through, for example, an actual value in that parameter. You can't send, because what's happening there, although it's an integer and it matches, we physically are going to change our day and send back an answer. It cannot send back an answer into a value. it can only send back an answer into a parameter or a variable, sorry. So you must make sure that your reference parameters, when you call them, you must give them some sort of variables that can store the answers of your reference parameters that are going to be coming back with values. Okay, so that is an introduction to reference parameters. Reference parameters are basically if you want to change the parameter inside the procedure, that change is reflected back in the original program's variables that were called when you called that procedure. For the other videos in this video series, part 1 to part 4, as well as other videos that can help you with your Delphi, go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, like our videos. We'd love to hear from you. You can follow us on Facebook or on Twitter so that you can find out whenever we post new videos. And remember, don't do it the long way, do it the Mr. Long way.